Hi guys, I wanted to discuss on how the wounding themes can be mapped or connected to the different healing themes. This is just like a good summary of it so that you have it handy. Hi, hi. Before I start, some things to note. So for each of the wounding themes in the book, when they were discussing the wounding themes, they had the healing aspect of those, right? And I try to map that to the healing themes themselves in particular. That being said, within the healing themes, they have different aspects too, and it's slightly different from the wounding themes. And I'll put that up there so that the things I'm saying don't sound too abstract. So within the healing themes aspects, you have how to access the theme and what the theme is working on. So that's how to access and what it's working on. If you recall in the previous episode when I was discussing the wounding theme of consciousness, I had spoke about the need to release and replace. So for release, that essentially tells us how to like heal these wounded themes, right? And then replacing is the new narratives that would help us replace the negative thoughts that we have attached to those themes. That being said, for the release, I connected those to the healing themes aspect, specifically how to access the themes and what it's working on. For the replace, I connected those to the thoughts associated with the healing themes. So, again, these were already presented as a wounded theme aspect of healing, but when they come up in the healing themes, they show up as how to access this theme, what it's working on, and thoughts and values associated with the healing themes. So, with regards to the first part, which is release, the release is what exactly is the medicine? Let's use that term. What exactly is the medicine that is suitable for this specific wounding? You have this wound. How do we, what is the medicine to treat this wound? So, that's a general goal towards the healing. So again, how to access this theme and what it's working on, the aspect under the healing theme will tag towards the wounding in terms of how we are trying to cure, heal this wounding. So the second part is the replace. Now, the replace for me, I see it as the thoughts and values that are being replaced, like the new narratives that we're replacing with. And you know how, with the whole wounding, we've associated the wounding with certain thoughts, feelings, and actions, right? So the trigger or the wounding is connected to thoughts, feelings, and actions. But the thoughts is what come up in our heads that are connected to the belief system, connected to that wounding theme. Okay. So it's very important to note that the thoughts are what, when being in the wounded theme of consciousness, the thoughts are kind of like what you hold on to. That's what's more tangible. That's what is on the surface of your mind. The belief system is much deeper. So when we think about it that way, we start to see how, if we truly want to start making these changes, yes, we have this goal to release. Yes, we have this goal to cure the wound, to heal the wound, to provide medicine for the wound, which translates to these healing themes, what it's working on, and how to access the theme. But we also have the new narratives, which on the healing side would be the thoughts and values associated with. And so these are more the path through which we can get to this goal. So the thoughts are the more tangible things in our minds that access certain belief systems, certain, that. But the thoughts now would represent the thoughts and values of the healing will represent that pathway through which we can get to this goal, which is to release. So release and replace with new thoughts. That's how I see it. That being said, replacing seals the deal, seals it in. We already know, and if you're being aware of, your own thought patterns and all that, you know that the thoughts are what come up, right? And once you have these new narratives, they create such tangible reference so that when one thought comes up, you also have the new narrative as the counter thoughts that you replace them with, right? So a good example would be with rejection, a thought that could come up, knowing that the root belief is I'm unlovable, a thought that could come up could be everyone hates me, everyone rejects me. On the flip, when we get the antidote for that, healing balm for that, we have acceptance. Thoughts and values associated with acceptance. The counter thought of healing the wound of rejection is all are worthy of forgiveness and compassion. So going forward, I will be listing the different themes, wounded themes of consciousness, and the healing themes that are connected to these, right? I would also be, painting a picture of the transition across these different wounded themes of consciousness. Yeah, and so we just see how with the wounded themes we get to transition through to the higher themes. And then we also see how they're connected to the healing themes that help us heal these wounded themes, right? And because we already discussed the healing themes, we have an idea of, what exactly is going on here. And now we get even more context to the specific wounded theme. I remember I said what it's working on is more so how we release, and then the thoughts and values associated with this theme is how we replace. For this session, I'm only going to be sharing what it's working on. I think that's the major goal here. And the thoughts and the values, I could also attach some images. Let's get into it. For the wound of rejection, we'll start from there. The healing theme associated with that is understanding and acceptance. So, first, we understand that this was not us to begin with, we're being projected onto. So, with understanding, again, we're trying to expand our knowledge, go beyond, and seek the truth about a situation, unbiased opinion. So, the truth about the situation in this case is that we were projected onto, right? And you could also see that in a sense like compassionate understanding, which is one of the aspects of acceptance theme. That is what the acceptance team is working on. It is compassionate understanding. And so those two kind of go hand in hand in the sense that understanding in itself is trying to find the truth, but compassionate understanding adds that layer of compassion to it. And that is an aspect of acceptance. So having compassionate understanding that this was not ours to begin with, we're projected onto, there is a limitation of the human condition, right? Everyone is just doing the best that they can, and even that is limited. So, in a way, there could be things that are perceived as, rejection, because at the end of the day, these people have a limitation, and that's just how humans are. We all are flawed in a sense. So accepting the limitations of humans, accepting the limitation of the human condition, and also having compassionate understanding for the human condition overall. And another thing that we could also see play out in a way, but not quite as much, because I believe that with the theme of rejection, like it's down bad, honestly. So at that point, the sense of self is not developed yet, but a goal would be towards self validation, right? Because at the end of the day, rejection wants to be loved, seeks to be loved, and feel enough, right? So, yeah, self validation that comes with acceptance would also be a very interesting play out, right? Because at the end of the day, if someone who seeks to feel worthy can get that for their own self, can validate their own self, then that really is, that evolution of self. So, but primarily, the wound of rejection heals through, first of all, understanding or compassionate understanding of the human condition, understanding that we were projected onto, it wasn't about us, understanding that even the people that projected this onto us were also projected onto as well. So that kind of, again, reinforces the compassion for the human limitation. This creates a more healing perspective for someone going through the wounding of rejection. From a place of rejection, and now healing that place. So, rejection is primarily shame, and being able to evolve past the shame and healing that, you understand that this was never yours to begin with and you were projected onto. Now, as you move forward to the next theme, which is judgment, there is that sense of, okay, this was not mine, this was somebody else's, right? And because rejection is such a low place to be, there's that tendency to want to point fingers. Okay, who did this to me, right? And because the self had been rejected for so long, now the self wants to reject other people in a sense. And that's how we see judgment play out. And so that judgment is pointing fingers to the world, because the world has rejected the self, and the self has reinforced the rejection, internalized the rejection, and that's how the self keeps perceiving the world, right? I remember I said the internal reinforces the external, and the internal is what projects the external. So if someone who is in the stream of consciousness of rejection would see every opportunity to feel rejected or anything that resembles rejection in a current experience to be that it is rejected. So having felt rejection from the world, it now wants to point fingers at the world and say, okay, I'm judging you, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong. Now, with rejection comes shame, and shame is not outspoken. Shame is very, like, it's covered. You cover your shame. I mean, that's what they say. So shame is very covered. But once you heal that and you're able to transition to the next phase, which is judgment, in a sense, you're more outspoken, and now you want to point fingers at the world. So that's what brings us to judgment. So to heal the wound of judgment, it is acceptance slash understanding and accountability. So first, acceptance. With acceptance, what it's working on, the aspect is compassionate understanding for the human condition yet again. You have to solidify that humans are flawed and they have limits. So you accept that there is a limit to everything. And as much as you want to point fingers, there is there is a limitation. People aren't perfect. So if you want to start pointing fingers, you would keep pointing fingers over and over again. And what do we say about getting stuck? What do we say about a need to expand? Because if we start looking for things to contend with, we're never gonna go out of things to contend with. We're never gonna go out of things to judge. We're never gonna go out of people to point fingers at. So for your own evolution and peace of mind, which is our destination, we have to look past that. We have to understand that there is a human limitation. And once we start understanding that, we start to accept the reality of what is, which brings us to another aspect of acceptance. We accept what is, we're fine with it, right? We understand that, okay, this is the situation at play, and we're accepting of it. And that acceptance of what is, not trying to change anything on the outside, the outcome, just accepting things as they are and understanding that there is a bigger picture at play, even though we do not understand it, even though we cannot quite comprehend it yet. We we see that there's a bigger picture at play, right? And our understanding are limited, just as there is a compassionate understanding for the human limitation. We also accept that for our own self, that there is a limitation to our understanding. So even as we're trying to understand this thing going on, there's a bigger picture at play, there is a limitation to the human understanding, we also take that for our own self, that we do not also understand what is going on and we are also limited, just as much as the people we're pointing fingers at are limited too. So in that vein of us being limited too, we just accept that okay, it is what it is and we're fine with that. And from that place, we can now take accountability to admit and face our past denials and face our past wrongdoings or shortcomings, right? And that's where we stop judging other people and, in a sense, start judging ourselves. I use judging, like, in a sense, in quotes, because accountability is a positive direction of judgment. Accountability is not judging to make yourself feel better, because when you judge, you're judging from a place of, oh, you're judging other people to make yourself feel better, right? And that's what the transition was from rejection, because I had been rejected, right? There was that need to go ahead and now point fingers and judge other people. But that in itself is a negative judgment in quotes. Accountability is a positive judgment in quotes. Accountability is honesty, being able to see yourself and face what you have done. And accountability is on the flip side, because just as much as you're judging other people, right, because you're pointing fingers, you're also pointing fingers back at yourself. If you learn to judge, you learn to judge, period. If you learn from outside to judge, as in through judging other people, that is the same vein and that is the same mind that you would use to judge your own self. Because remember, the human condition, humans are limited, and once you start seeing a limitation outside in other people, you start seeing a limitation in yourself too, because you as well as are limited. So in a way, accountability is ready to face challenges, and coming from a place of accepting limitation, it no longer sees facing its own shortcomings as a negative thing. It sees it as a noble thing to a good cause, because it has accepted the limitation. Whatever accountability is being taken is not coming from a place of judgment, not to make yourself feel better about something else, but to look inward and now face yourself. So, just to recap, in terms of judgment, or you're pointing your fingers outward, and the funny thing about pointing your fingers outward is that you would come back and point fingers at yourself too. Same thing, right? So, you are doing you are doing more harm than good if you're in a judgmental state. But accountability is a more understanding form of facing yourself. And accountability is not looking outside, it's looking inward to face yourself. With judgment, you're looking outside to face other people and point fingers so that you feel better about yourself. You don't realize that as you're facing other people and pointing fingers, you're pointing fingers at yourself too. Accountability takes that energy and faces self once it has accepted self and accepted others' limitation. We're at the point where we are seeing ourselves for the things that we have done. We are seeing our shortcomings. And here's where it gets tricky, because earlier we were pointing fingers outside. Now we're beginning to face ourselves and seeing ourselves for who we truly are. We're seeing the weight of our previous consequences. We're seeing the things that we've done. We're seeing how we thought, oh, we were fine, we were cool, that they did this to us.